Chair recognizes the senator from Hawaii.
Mr. President, Donald Trump is dragging us back into war again, and no one is exactly sure why. He achieved almost none of his objectives that he set out at the beginning of the war while spending tens, if not hundreds, of billions of dollars and forcing Americans to pay more for everything, especially gas and groceries. It's been only a few days since the fighting resumed, and gas is already up to $4.89 nationally and $5.44 in Hawaii. And the president can't be bothered to explain why we are at war again and what we are supposed to be getting out of it. So let's just go through his own stated objectives at the start of the war and see where we stand today. Number one, regime change. And I quote, "There will be no deal with Iran except unconditional surrender," all caps, Donald Trump said in the first week of war. He told the Iranians, quote, "When we're finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take." How did that work out? The regime is intact. The regime is led by a younger Ayatollah with the same last name, emboldened by the knowledge that they survived months of war against the world's greatest superpower. The Iranian opposition is weaker than it was before the war, and the Iranian people are no freer today. Look, regime change wars rarely ever end well. And the idea that Trump was going to be able to go in and quickly topple the regime, much like he did in Venezuela a month earlier, was always absurd. But he did it anyway. Okay, goal number two, no nuclear weapons. Quote, "We will ensure that Iran does not obtain a nuclear weapon. They will never have a nuclear weapon," Trump said on the day he launched the war. Now, it's true that heavy strikes last summer and the first phase of the war this spring have set back Iran's nuclear program. It is also true that that in the Memorandum of Understanding that has since fallen apart, Iran agreed to the same thing that it agreed to under the JCPOA, under the Obama nuclear agreement. We got all of this without having to go to war. And the criticism of the Obama agreement, and I was on the floor defending it, was that it didn't last long enough. Not that it wasn't any good, but that it didn't last in perpetuity, that it was only good for 10 years. Now we've got nothing. Now we've got nothing. And to that point, having repeatedly ruled out allowing any uranium enrichment and demanding that Iran turn over its uranium stockpile, Trump has changed his tune on both, and I quote, "It's a little hard. It's a little hard when other people have it, other adjoining states have it, and you're not letting them have it for purposes of electricity and things like that." This is Trump on uranium enrichment. On acquiring stockpiles, he said, quote, "You can make the case, why even bother? It's not very valuable stuff. Why even bother?" And that is the story of this war in a nutshell. Trump sets before us an impossible goal, and when it fails, he either moves the goalposts or backs down completely. The next goal, obliterating Iran's missiles. Quote, "We're going to destroy their missiles and raise their missile industry to the ground. It will be totally obliterated." He said that on February 28th. But according to press reports, U.S. intelligence agencies estimated that roughly 70% of Iran's pre-war missile stockpile was still intact as of May. And just this week, Iran started firing missiles again at tankers in the Strait of Hormuz and at military bases across the Middle East, demonstrating both its leverage and its ability to continue fighting. Okay, well, what about the goal of cutting off Iran's funding for proxy groups? The administration has mostly stopped talking about it, and there was no mention of Iran's support for Hezbollah or other groups in the MOU. In fact, the MOU allowed Iran to sell its oil freely, even though Trump's own State Department told Congress that oil exports are a primary revenue source for Iran's financing of proxies. So all of the stated objectives of this war have not been met. Finally, how are they doing on keeping the Strait of Hormuz open and free? Well, it's closed again, and Trump and Iran are back and forth going at it over who gets to control and who gets to charge tolls. To be clear, this was never a problem pre-war. And so now the objective in ending this war is just to get to the status quo before the war. We went to war to eliminate their ballistic missile capability, not on the nuclear side, not a success. We went to war to change the regime. Not only not a success, but a terrible failure. We've got a younger and more radical and entrenched Ayatollah in the regime of Iran. And now they know they can withstand our best hit. We went to war to eliminate their nuclear program, and not only did we not do that, but Donald Trump himself is kind of characterizing it like it's no big deal. And so now we're negotiating, not for any of the reasons that were stated, to put our service members in harm's way and to spend tens of billions of dollars of taxpayer funding for this war, and to raise the price of gasoline by $1.50 a gallon, to raise the price of fertilizer and plastics and natural gas and electronics, to raise the price of almost everything. We met none of our objectives, and now our objective is just keep sea lanes open. Sea lanes were open. Sea lanes are always open. That is not a foreign policy objective of the United States of America in the sense that we have to work really hard to do it. Freedom of navigation is a basic principle that we enforce around the world, but we don't have to bomb anybody to get it. And so now the end game is let's try to get the straits open and pretend that the reasons that we went to war were not the reasons that we went to war. And I think what is the most disgusting about all of this, someone used to say, armies don't go to war, countries go to war. Now, why does that matter? You cannot go to war without the support of the American public. You cannot go to war without explaining to the American public what you are up to. And what happened many months ago was Donald Trump woke up one morning and said, I guess we're taking kinetic action against Iran. And people are finding, okay, sorry, what? What exactly are we doing and why? There was no buildup, there was no explaining, and most importantly for us as United States senators, there was no vote on the authorization of the use of military force. Now, they are going to say that under the War Powers Resolution, they have this ability to basically take military action if there's an imminent threat to the safety of the United States of America. And then they got 60 days, and it's kind of complicated exactly how it works. But what they have said now is that, no, this isn't a war. That's number one. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, it is a war, but we have 60 days. Oh, the war is off because the MOU for the ceasefire is now being implemented. And now the war is back on, and they're acting as if, as a legal matter, this new kinetic engagement is a second and separate war, and the clock starts again. And you got 60 days again to delay Congress from weighing in. And this is not some procedural nicety. This isn't me as a politician like protecting my prerogatives. The reason this matters is the people's representatives in the Congress have to vote before we go to war. And there are some narrow exceptions if we are in danger. You don't want to have to assemble Congress if we're in immediate danger. Fine. We are not in immediate danger. We were never in immediate danger. If you want to claim that the ICBM array that the IRGC had was a danger to the United States, come down, at least testify before the Foreign Relations Committee and the Armed Services Committee, and then at least have a debate on the damn floor of the United States Senate. And it's worse than that, because to the extent that we've had any votes at all, we actually have prevailed. A majority of members of this body have said that this war should come to a conclusion. And so my Republican colleagues are saying, hey, why don't we pass the defense authorization? After all, it's a big bipartisan bill and we always do it. That's true. We always do it. And I think 13 out of 14 years, 12 out of 13 years, I voted for the National Defense Authorization Act. And the reason I voted no yesterday is because I'm not voting for a defense bill until this war is over. And I'm not voting for a defense bill until we get to debate the most important thing happening in terms of our national defense. We are at war, and we are being prevented from even overseeing it. We are just asked to fork over tens and tens of billions of dollars without so much as weighing in on this is an authorization of the use of military force. The president, as the commander-in-chief of our military, may engage kinetically with another country. We've decided that. We've been elected. We've decided that. None of that happened. Why? Because they don't have the votes for that. Why do they not have the votes for that? Because this war is stupid and the public knows it. I yield the floor. I don't need a copy of it, so absolutely not what I said, though.
Thank you, sir.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsterbrooks.
President.
Senator from Tennessee.
Are we in a quorum call?
We are, Senator.
I ask that we dispense with the quorum call.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. America lost a fearless patriot in our friend Lindsey Graham. He devoted his life to serving the people of South Carolina and this nation. He never shied away from a difficult fight, and he always stuck to his principles. It's been so moving to see all the tributes to his life and his legacy pour in from each side of the aisle. It speaks to who he was as a leader, statesman, and a public servant. He believed in robust, respectful, bipartisan debate, and he knew that in Washington, you can only solve problems by building a big tent and inviting people to join you. He did it time and again across more than 3 decades in public office, working to protect our national security, strengthen our military, secure our border, protect kids online, and save our elections. I had the honor of serving alongside him on the Judiciary Committee, including during his time as both chair and ranking member. He knew that peace and prosperity are only possible under the rule of law, and he fought to defend the rule of law. Just a few months ago, Lindsey and I filed the 287G Expansion Act to encourage state and local law enforcement to partner with ICE and accomplish President Trump's goal of deporting criminal illegal aliens and keeping our communities safe. Last month, we also introduced the Election Security Partnership Act to get more states to submit their voter rolls to DHS through the SAVE program and secure our elections. On that issue, Lindsey was a champion of the Save America Act to ensure that only American citizens vote in American elections. The Senate should put election integrity measures on the floor for a vote and honor his legacy. That's exactly what he would encourage us to do. It was so moving to see his sister Darlene sworn into office yesterday to complete his term. My prayers are with her, with his family, friends, staff, and all who loved him. May he rest in peace. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the next portion of my remarks be placed separately in the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Few things are more sacred than our citizenship. It's what empowers us to defend our freedoms, choose our elected representatives, and serve our nation. It is what makes us we the people. Yet for years, one industry has undermined this cherished institution, and that industry is birth tourism. Each year, tens of thousands of foreigners give birth in our country with the intention, and the only intention, of securing U.S. citizenship for that child. These tourists are often wealthy nationals from China and Russia. Then they return to their home countries as soon as they receive that child's paperwork, their U.S. passport, their Social Security number. Behind this appalling practice is a multi-million-dollar industry that helps clients exploit our nation's immigration laws. What they're doing is helping people circumvent the legal process. Now, during President Trump's first administration, the Justice Department investigated this, and they actually charged 19 people for operating 3 birth tourism schemes in Southern California. These schemes brought thousands of Chinese nationals to our country to give birth. The operators actually instruct their clients on how to apply for visas and trick the system. They instruct them on how to deceive U.S. Customs officials about the purpose of their stay, and then they instruct them on where to get medical care, where they're going to be housed. They also purchased flights and then made those housing arrangements for those individuals while charging them tens of thousands of dollars. Mr. President, this is fraud. Now, what we do know is among the customers of these birth tourism companies are Chinese government officials, including individuals affiliated with state-owned radio stations and the Public Security Bureau in the Beijing municipal government. In a separate scheme, a company with branches in Miami and in Russia charged clients up to $49,000 to help them travel to our country to obtain citizenship for their newborns. On its website, the company boasted that it served, and I'm quoting from the website, the wives of dignitaries, oligarchs, and celebrities, end quote. So they admit they're committing fraud. They admit they are circumventing U.S. law. Now, what is so interesting about this is they take it a step further. They've come here. They've defrauded the system. They've deceived U.S. officials. They have the baby. They get their paperwork, and they're going to exit the country. So these companies now advise these women on how to gain permanent residency status through their newborn's citizenship. Bear in mind, I have just said, these are the wives and women that are a part of the Chinese Communist Party leadership. The website says from Russia, it's oligarchs, it is celebrities, it is officials. They are giving birth and then having that child deemed a U.S. citizen, then leaving the country to rear that child with a Russian mindset or a Chinese mindset. Now, last week, Governor Greg Abbott launched an investigation into a Texas hospital that advertised childbirth packages in Mexico with the tagline, and I quote, "Have my baby in Texas," end quote. So by exploiting our nation's immigration laws, this industry helps clients obtain all the blessings of American citizenship and none of the responsibilities. Zero, zip, nada, nothing. You know, Mr. President, the question to ask is this what our men and women in uniform have fought for when we talk about defending our nation, our sovereignty, our freedoms? To have a cheap, fraudulent company conduct fraudulent activity and sell U.S. citizenship. Well, that is what they are doing. Now, think about what it takes to become a U.S. citizen if someone wants to be naturalized as a U.S. citizen. First, they must maintain continuous residency in the U.S. for 5 years, have a good moral character, demonstrate an attachment to the principles of the U.S. Constitution, and a firm grasp of U.S. and American history, display proficiency in English, and take an oath of allegiance to the United States. Now, do those responsibilities and actions sound anything like what these birth tourism companies are out here selling? The answer is no, absolutely not. Again, the Democrats work overtime trying to make illegal legal. We saw it through Joe Biden with the open border. We saw it with cabinet secretary after cabinet secretary who tried to find workarounds, who tried to say, we're going to enforce part of the law, but not all of the law. They want it to be convenient. They don't want any borders. They're just not going to stand and defend the United States. Now, the children of birth tourists avoid all of those requirements for naturalized citizenship. Yet, get this, they can vote in our elections. The day they turn 18, they can be voting. They can serve in public office, and yes, indeed, on a U.S. passport, they can come and go as they please. To address this abuse of our laws, President Trump issued an executive order last year that prohibited the newborn children of foreigners from obtaining U.S. citizenship. In a disappointing ruling earlier this month, the Supreme Court struck down that order, allowing this horrible practice of birth tourism to continue. The Trump administration has vowed to use every legal avenue available to them to end birth tourism in America. Congress should do everything in its power to support this effort, which is why this week I have reintroduced the Ban Birth Tourism Act. This bill would amend the Immigration and Nationality Act to ban birth tourism as a permissible basis for obtaining a temporary visitor visa to gain admission to our country. It would also add birth tourism to the list of immediately deportable offenses under the law. These measures would help ensure that future Democrat administrations cannot lay out the welcome mat for foreign visitors hoping to exploit our laws. Mr. President, the way I look at it, our citizenship, being an American, and we have all stood and celebrated our great nation as we've celebrated America 250. And we know that to each and every citizen, being a citizen is one of the greatest blessings. It means you're part of the greatest people in the greatest country on the face of the earth. It must never be for sale. I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alston Brooks.